Hey everyone, Lauren from Lawtrades here. Thanks for taking the time to join us. I recently joined the Lawtrades team from a big law firm kind of focused on the tech and venture capital space, supporting our tech and fast-growing tech companies. But joined and now sit in our accounts management team and would love to meet more of you later on in the networking portion of today's event. So many of you have been a part of our community for a long time now and are familiar with Lawtrades, but for those who haven't been, Lawtrades essentially provides a flexible tech-enabled workforce to busy in-house teams, providing value, efficiency, and of course, scalability. In short, giving busy GCs power to do more with less. And one thing that the Lawtrades team takes a great deal of pride in is our community that we're building. And quite frequently, we host these tactical conversations. And today, interestingly, we're going to be talking about how to market your legal team internally so that you're seen as a team of yes and not a bottleneck, so to speak. So moderating our panel today is Lydia Cheuk. She has kind of seen the legal industry in-house from an eagle eye lens. She started traditionally in big law at Goodwin, interestingly navigated into the Blue Man Media Group, where she spent many years in-house in the media industry and now serves as general counsel to direct-to-consumer travel and lifestyle brand that you may or may not have heard of. It's actually one of my favorites, Ouis. So Lydia, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm going to kick it over to you to more thoughtfully introduce yourself and, of course, introduce our fantastic panelists.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm super excited to talk to everyone today. As Lauren mentioned, I'm the general counsel at Ouis. I've been at the company since 2018. If you haven't heard of us, it probably means you're not on Instagram because we do push pretty aggressively to everyone. We have, we are a growing brand. I think COVID has been a really interesting time for us being in the travel space. We have been facing not only the whole global pandemic thing, supply chain challenges, but it's a super exciting time now because we're up and away again. I'd love to throw this to Ramya, who is on our panel, so she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Lydia. Lydia, I'm so excited to speak to everyone. My name is Ramya Ravishankar. I'm Associate General Counsel at a company called Bowery Farming. We are a venture-backed, New York-based vertical farming company. And what that means is we grow produce indoors. Traditional agriculture is very wasteful in a lot of ways, and we kind of cut down on the waste by placing our farms right next to the communities that we feed. And we do this without the use of pesticides because when you grow indoors, you don't have pests to deal with. And instead, we have very flavorful and nutritious produce year round. Similar to Lydia, the supply chain challenges that Ouis has felt, we also feel. But because our supply chain is so much shorter, our food is actually able to get to grocery store shelves and our consumers that much faster. I've been at Bowery for a little over 2 years, and we are a small legal team. It has grown over the last little while, but I'm really excited to talk to everyone, especially from the angle of, supporting several hundred people per lawyer on our team. So again, happy to be here. I'll pass it over to Arianna.
Thank you so much, Ramya and Lydia. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Arianna Marks. I'm an Associate General Counsel at Beanstalk. At Beanstalk, we're a branding and licensing agency. What we do is we work on building brands, expanding brands, and expanding that relationship that consumers have with these brands across many different categories. Some of my largest clients that I work on day to day include Procter & Gamble, Microsoft, the US Army, a number of UK-based clients as well. Beanstalk has offices around the globe, including in the UK, in New York, in Miami, in Cincinnati, and a number of other locations that we're recently, getting our footprint in. So that's a little bit about me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
I guess I'm the only one left. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me at today, Lawtrades, and I'm so pleased to be around Arianna, Ramya, and Lydia. So my name is Sarah Ouis, and I used to work in-house. So I've left the in-house legal profession not so long ago. So when I was in-house, I worked in various legal departments of various sizes, but I guess my most prominent experience was in the pharmaceutical industry. where I've basically started off as a sole counsel and then scaled up a legal team from scratch. So we've grown from 1 to 4 in under 2 years, and the revenue growth was about 800%. So there was a lot going on when I was in-house, and I've really, I guess, figured that, I've done it. I've been there, done that type of thing. But what I realized is that I was much more passionate about solving problems for the legal industry as opposed to the practice of law itself, which led to my recent move away from in-house, but more towards legal design. So I am today a legal designer and founder of Law But How, which is a legal design studio. And I also work at Contract.ai in the legal tech space. Contract.ai have a legal management platform, and I support them on the digital transformation side of legal teams as well. Thank you so much for having me, and exciting to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so today's webinar is about marketing your legal team. And I'm super interested in this topic because I think that we don't talk about this enough as lawyers. I think as lawyers, we're all really focused on getting the work done and being really good and really perfect and being very helpful and good at the technical part of being a lawyer. But there's this whole other aspect about marketing your services to your in-house clients and your team. So the question, why is it important to market your legal team or to develop a brand for your team? And I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, but something that I always say is that you should market your legal team because everyone else in your company is marketing their team. They're all doing it. So you need to do it too, right? So your marketing team, they're doing it. They're kind of like maybe like the sexier things, right? That everyone knows. You launch a campaign, and that's part of them marketing their value across the company. So why market our team? And let's get into how we do that. Ramya, why don't you kick that off?
Sure. I think, Lydia, you make a really good point. It's maybe not natural for lawyers to come in and advertise ourselves or promote our value add, but I think it's really important to do that at the get-go so that we can be sort of thought partners with the business functions that we're supporting, as opposed to being brought in at the end when something goes sideways or it's maybe past the point of return where you can mitigate whatever risk you could have otherwise foreseen. So being upfront early on and kind of flagging that you're not just a legal brain, but also someone who could be a business partner is really helpful. And I can share, there's a recent example at my job where I did this. We were launching a new product and I kind of just flagged that I wanted to learn more about how we were thinking about it, just so that I could understand the business better. And by raising my hand and saying, hey, tell me more about this, they brought me along on the journey. And there were several areas where they may not have brought in legal to advise, but I could proactively just and organically provide advice as that product went from idea inception to execution. So this way, those pitfalls that could have otherwise come up were avoided because legal was brought along as an equal contributor throughout.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. And I think especially what you said, Ramya, about coming in at the beginning, and especially in our position as in-house counsel, we have the benefit of being business minded and being involved in these business conversations. And sometimes that could get lost because, as Lydia mentioned, we as lawyers don't necessarily have all of that strength and that loud voice behind us saying, marketing what we do exactly. And also, as many of us know, lawyers don't have the best rep. We get sort of stereotyped in certain ways. And, as people forget, we're individuals, we're humans. So being able to market yourself as a human, as an individual who has business acumen. And I also think it's really helpful to share your experiences with the business team at the outset so they can really value and understand what you can bring to the table. So for example, maybe reference similar deals that you've worked on or similar experiences that you've had in that business setting where you could speak to the industry or you could speak to things that you know about that business category, for example. So I think, being friendly and, like you said, Ramya, including yourself at the outset, letting the teams know you're eager to be involved and that you actually have similar experiences where you could contribute more than just, the legal concerns. I think that always, opens the business team's minds a little bit, just to see, okay, maybe we don't want to just throw them the contract in the final hour, and maybe we want to flesh those conversations out at the beginning, therefore, leading to a more streamlined process along the way.
Yeah, and just on that, I think you end up actually empowering the business teams when you do that, because I've had scenarios where people have reached out proactively because, of that approachability and all of that credibility that you were talking about, Arianna. And in so doing, they'll ask a question that doesn't have a legal analysis attached to it. So I would often be like, actually, I think this is really up to you. How are you thinking about it? Sort of just being a foil and a mirror to their business thinking. And then they kind of come away being like, oh yeah, this is something that I get to make the call on. These are all great considerations, but ultimately that decision comes back to me. That's great. Thanks so much. But here I am moving forward and building the business.
Absolutely. I think it almost takes, like you said, empowers them. It takes some pressure off of them as well. Yeah. They feel less of a burden to stay within certain parameters. Once legal is able to say, this is your call, here's how I think about it, let me know how you think about it, I think it lets everyone be a little bit more open-minded, lets everyone feel a little bit more comfortable exploring creative solutions, so they don't feel, pigeonholed in some way.
The only thing I would add, I guess you guys have said it all, is that if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you. And in all fairness, for the type of work that we do, nobody's going to look after our work. Nobody's going to look into our contracts and look at this beautiful limitation of liability provision. This is never going to happen, right? So it's really important that you are able to voice whatever you're doing and whatever tangible outcomes work is giving. So how many contracts you've turned around? What is the average turnaround for a particular contract, and how it could be reduced, or how you have managed to reduce it by simplifying your playbook, or anything that you can do that really facilitates the business, that happens almost hidden in your corner. You really have to voice it out, because this is the only way that people are going to start valuing what you do and the tangible outcomes that you are providing to the business. So yeah, great inputs.
I love that. I actually just pulled down at my company, we use Ironclad. So I had my legal ops person pull down a bunch of data and slice it various ways. But just because my plan is to present that to my exec team, because I feel very fortunate. I think our team is extremely valued at Ouis. I think legal is 100% seen as a thought partner. But when you see these numbers that in 2021, my team looked at 1,200 contracts, I lead the legal team, and that number was so mind-blowing to me. It's insane, right? And so I think it just level sets for the entire organization how much work y'all are doing. So those numbers, I think the data is super, super helpful. I also really liked, Ramya and Arianna, what you're talking about, because you were pointing to basically opening a dialogue with the other teams cross-functionally, right? So as opposed to this old school thought of oh, I have a contract and I'm going to give it to legal, who sits in a dark corner, and it goes into a black hole and then it comes out again and they tell us it's okay. It's really more about a dialogue, because you're helping build and run and forward that business together. And as the sooner you can get in there and have that dialogue and build those relationships, it's super, super helpful. So let's talk a little bit about what challenge you all have faced in making that happen, right? Because I think all of us in our jobs have faced certain challenges with, as Arianna pointed to, which is sometimes there's stereotype around lawyers. At our company, a lot of our workforce is very young. They've never worked with lawyers, so they have no actual practical knowledge of what that looks like. They just have an impression. So how do you, what challenges have you faced and how do you overcome them? Who wants to go first?
I could kick it off, I think.
Go for it.
So I think, you raised such a good point, Lydia, that it's about that dialogue. And I think that opening that dialogue is what creates the strongest agreement at the end of the day. And it is difficult because also, especially depending on the environment that you're in, but, very typical within an in-house environment, is you're working across many different categories of business. You're dealing with employees who have an expertise in many different areas. And you just sort of want to, again, point out the value and the tangible value that you can provide so that they're able to see that. I think it's definitely difficult. When we think of, difficulties that I've faced, again, I'm very fortunate to be a part of a company that really values their legal, really tries to encourage their legal to participate as much as possible on the business end, to collaborate with their business teams, and include if I have a thought as to how I think a contract would be better off being structured a certain way, my company absolutely encourages me to speak up and share those thoughts. And I think having an environment like that really helps to foster another environment that creates a comfort with the lawyers, that creates more of a collaboration. It creates it creates an environment where people feel a little bit more comfortable sharing their ideas across all platforms. Some difficulties that I can think of is, the business team has a timeline and they have a goal. And I often want to remind my business teams I have the same goals that they do. One of the things that we could sort of, where our processes contradict each other a little bit is I might have a business team that has, the skeleton of aligned business terms, and they want me to get started on drafting and maybe negotiating the agreement. And one of the things that we've found to be a nice process for us as a company is we want to make sure that we have finalized alignment on those business terms before we start getting into the drafting and negotiations. Oftentimes, that might be met with some resistance. The business team wants to get the ball rolling. They want things to get going. And I find that after you establish that relationship that we talked about a little while ago, the business team is a little more open and understanding to why you are saying we want to take a step back and handle it in a little bit more of a concrete, processed way. And I've explained that I actually think it leads to a weaker negotiation and a more difficult time finding that common ground with a counterparty if you don't have solidified business terms at the outset. So I find that after a few experiences like that and, building that trust and that relationship with my business teams, they're able to see the benefit in having those solidified business terms. And even if it slows things down a little bit at the beginning, it ends up in a more productive and a more successful deal at the end of the day. So I think managing the relationships with, competing priorities and sort of letting everyone know where I'm coming from and how I think it will benefit the team overall, I think has really helped me overcome those hurdles. But it definitely is something that's difficult when you have a timeline and you have, business folks who want to make sure a deal gets done. We sort of want them to know we're partners. We share the same goal, but that there might be certain things that help the whole thing go a little bit smoother.
I can add to that, Arianna, because I think relationship is a really strong component of establishing a very good reputation for the legal department. I faced it firsthand when I was working in-house, because obviously I was the first counsel in my last experience. I was the first and sole counsel entering the company, so they never worked with a lawyer before. So really, they really didn't know what to expect, right? But the few who had, and I guess my previous experience is really the legal teams were more positioned as a cost center. So that's kind of something that I really figured from a very junior stage of my career, that, okay, there is an issue, generally speaking, with the way the legal departments are perceived. So I guess whether in my last experience or even the ones before that, I've kind of always tried to build those relationships and try to understand what the end goals were, for basically whatever they want to achieve, and how as an in-house lawyer I can help them achieving those goals. So understanding obviously the audience, the end user is paramount in order to establish trust and relationship. And I think so that would be number one. Number two would also be initiatives. So what are the things as an in-house legal team that you can do to facilitate whatever goals they are targeting? Again, if you have a sales department who wants to close 2 times faster, what are the things that you can facilitate at the contracting level to enable them to do that? And again, how do you communicate what you are doing in order to help them more proactively? So I guess understanding the goals, talking to your people, building those relationships really matter. Something else that I've done that really worked well was obviously leveraging those very underrated scenarios, in particular trainings. Trainings are so underrated. Like, we all just show up with ugly and boring PowerPoint, where really that's the occasion where we connect with our audience. We can talk to them. We can really transform the way we engage with our customers internally. And yet I think this is not necessarily enough leverage. So what I did, I've tried to implement audience engagement tools, and obviously those who follow me on LinkedIn would know that I love visuals, and I always try to visualize legal information. And so I've created all sorts of infographic to facilitate the understanding of commercial contracts and all of those things. And what I found is that it's really created, obviously, not only a relationship of trust, but also it kind of facilitated the, people would come to us a lot more often for contract-related questions or privacy-related questions, because they went to an engaging training, or they saw the infographic and it kind of prompts some questions for them. So so I would say don't underestimate the power of those little things that you can implement on a daily basis that don't cost anything. You don't have to be loaded with resources to make them happen. Just be creative, and of course, understand your clients internally and help them achieve whatever they have in mind.
Sarah, I love that you mentioned the presentation, and I think having those. I think a presentation is such an amazing way to introduce your company or your overall team, or have them become a little bit more familiar with the benefits of legal and everything that legal can do. And I know, Lydia, you mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, but it's also important to think about your audience. So, we're attorneys, but so we want to think about, when you make those presentations, you can visualize that data or that information in different ways. You can make graphs, you can use numbers, and there are many people who don't respond well to words. They like to see information in numbers set out in a graph. And so that's another way of passing along that information. And I also think that presentation, Sarah, like you mentioned, if you add some color to it and you add some personality to it, again, remind people we're humans, you become more approachable. And I think your legal team as a whole becomes more approachable, and people can see a little bit more of what you can offer them.
Yeah, I agree. I echo what Sarah and Arianna said. At Bowery, we have an intro to legal presentation. It's actually intro to legal and equity. So, people are really interested in understanding the equity part of their compensation. So that's how we hook them. And we have them periodically for all new hires. And the first part of the presentation is literally like our small legal team's face, like every single one of us plastered on there to say, look, this is what we look like. Big smiles. We're normal. We're human. Get to know us. But this is how we add value, and this is how we contribute to the company. And we go beyond just contracts. We talk about, legal's involvement with regulatory advice. We talk about, any external reputational questions that the company might be dealing with. We talk about real estate. We talk about intellectual property. We talk about the potential for disputes, all these different aspects of lawyering that, a regular business person might not think about, and how their specific function could interact with ours. Sometimes when I give the presentation, I actually spell it out and cater it to the audience. So I'll say, hey, John Smith, you're a software engineer. This is the kind of work you do. And this is how some of that work overlaps with the work I do. Let's make sure if something like this happens, you loop me or, my colleagues in. The other piece of it, Lydia, you were asking about challenges. I will say one thing that's sort of been specific to us, we're we're growing really fast, and we have a ton of people who are joining, and not all of them might come from work cultures where legal has been a thought partner from day one. So one of the challenges we've had is sort of bringing people into the Bowery way of doing things and the Bowery way of lawyering. So sometimes it's a difficult conversation after something's happened where legal wasn't looped in to tell them, actually, it would have been better or more effective if we had been brought in on the earlier side. These are the ways that we would have advised you differently. Please keep this in mind going forward. And that education, it takes a few iterations to get people to understand, where we should be brought along. And I don't know how sustainable this is. We're still, relatively small, so we can do that. But, especially for those who are part of small legal teams, I will say, like, having those kind of periodic check-ins and trainings is a helpful way to kind of remind people that it's not just contracts, or it's not just like regulatory advice. There's all these different things that legal can be relied on and should be relied on for help.
I think that's such a great point. Like, one of the beautiful and special things about a legal department is it's unique in that way, that we really touch almost every aspect of the business, which is, unique to other departments. So I think, Ramya, your point in just, broadening the scope of really everything that we do have our eyes on to make the business overall run more smoothly will, comfort the teams and make them feel more comfortable coming to us with any sort of issue.
So one of the questions we've had in the chat is, how do you present the legal team as more approachable? And I think that all of the things that all of you have mentioned are actually addressing that question. It's doing trainings. I mean, it's basically like how, developing touch points across your, like, the non-legal teams to develop those relationships, exposure to legal. You're human, you're here to help. I always say it's help me to help you, because you're all in the same boat and you all have the same exact goal, right? You might have different lenses through which you look through to get to that goal, but you're all rowing in the same way, hopefully. So another question we have is, what can you do if you have a resistant CEO? So and I'd like to broaden that question a little bit. So how do we get buy-in from your senior leadership, your exec team, whatever that looks like in your organization? It is really important to get that buy-in. And how do you all do that?
I can speak to that. I've had experiences with very resistant executives in the past, and I think, and funny enough, I went to a training on communication, and the trainer was saying, people aren't difficult; they just communicate differently. And it's very true. Like, we all resonate to different things. Some people are very analytical, so they will resonate with data. Some people are very emotional, so they will respond if you are being nice to them, or if you, kind of show empathy and, and strong care. If you are at the executive level, chances are that those people are driven. So they don't want the chit chat. They want, you have to be straight to the point. And so you really have to kind of understand the communication style of whoever you are talking to. And I think for me, it was really eye-opening, because I guess for my personality, I'm quite a people person, and that's the way I interact. Like, I really create those relationships. But actually, when I started to interact with people at the more senior level, as I became more senior in my role, I had to adapt the way I was communicating, because again, they don't care about you being friendly. They just want you to be straight to the point, give your point in 5 minutes and get them from A to B. That's really what they care about. And as soon as you understand that, you start adapting your communication, you start adapting your language. And this is really how you start getting their attention. So it's all about, I guess, figuring out your audience again, down to what we were saying before. Who are you talking to, and what their objectives are? And if they are CEOs or executives of all kind, they are really future focused. If they have a vision, they don't really care about the day-to-day data or the operational detail. They just want the one sentence summary of what's going on, and also what is the solution that you are bringing to the table. So that would be my 2 cents on this one.
Right. I love all of that. And I think that notion of help me help you. I mean, this whole talk could be titled, I think, Help Me Help You, because I think that that is really just sort of what we convey to our colleagues every day, and what our position is, and what we struggle our position to be seen as. Like, again, we are not looking to be this bottleneck. We have we share the same goals. We really just want to be here to help the process along. And I think, to answer that question of how do we go about doing this, how do we go about, getting companies or getting the C-suite to listen to this and, restructure, I think it's really company-wide. Beanstalk, where I am, is really so wonderful at inviting the legal team into certain conversations. So, for example, we have business brainstorms that, ironically, the lawyers are invited into, which you wouldn't typically think that would be the case. But I think it's such incredibly helpful tips come out of those conversations, because I think, like Ramya, you mentioned earlier, if you can just involve legal from the outset, we can sort of think of certain concerns or certain avenues of business that perhaps someone else didn't think of. As lawyers, we're trained to think a certain way, and it's a very unique way of thinking. And I think that could be incredibly helpful in a business setting. More importantly, not to say more importantly, but maybe something that would resonate with the C-suite a little bit more, is to say, I can be better at mitigating risk if you involve me in these business conversations at the outset. I can be in a better position to do my job in a better way if I'm involved in those business conversations, and we can sort of flesh out ideas together, rather than it be structured and then kicked over to us in the corner to look at and sort of reverse engineer, or then, as the business team might see it, set fire to, and then maybe have to backtrack. And we of course don't want that, because we just want, help us help you. So I think conveying that to the C-suite and letting them know that those conversations at the outset, and the beneficial way of thinking that lawyers, come with, I think it could be really helpful to the company overall to involve legal in those brainstorms and in those initial business conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo what Sarah and Arianna both said, but in particular, Sarah, you were talking about catering your message to your audience. And I think really reading and understanding what is important to your C-suite, and coming at it from a place of positive intent and maturity is really helpful, where you say, hey, I know X is really important to you. Let me learn more about that. Let me talk to you. Let me kind of ask you some probing questions. And as part of that dialogue, expose how I can be valuable to you, as opposed to coming in guns blazing saying, how dare you exclude me from this? Like, I need to be in the room. Because I think that can go a lot further, because they see you as a partner, as opposed to sort of this cost center or this like pain in their butt.
I totally agree with that. I think this is true not just for lawyers, but it's whoever you report to or your exec team. It's like, what's important to them, right? Because you're going to be like 95% of the things that I do, I don't discuss with my CEO. I mean, she's my boss, right? But like, she doesn't care about any of that, because she's trusting that I'm just doing my job. I know there are certain things that she's really going to care about, and those are things that we talk about. And I also know that there are areas that she has more knowledge of, and areas where she has less knowledge of. And you kind of, right? So the value you have, really, there's like a sweet spot between, like, there's this Venn, right? Between things that maybe the exec team or your boss or whoever, your CEO, things that they don't know, and things that are very important to them. So whatever's in that Venn, dig in there and get there, right? So that is how I think you can get the foot in the door, if you feel like you need to get the foot in the door. And then they see the value, right? And so it's just about building that relationship. I do know that not every company has places the value on legal the way that maybe my company does, or some of other companies do. But it's really, you just have to build the relationship. And it is unfortunate that you might have that hill to climb, but it is about, this is why you're here, because you're marketing your legal team. So how do you get those touch points? How do you build those relationships? How do you prove your value? How do you get in those conversations? I think something that's super, super important, and I have said this to my team and other lawyers, is you have to know your business. So that is how you get in there, right? So I've always said we sell luggage and travel goods. We have to know everything from the life cycle, the entire life cycle of the business. So that means you have to understand, like, you need to work with the digital team, customer checkout, what's going on there, privacy, manufacturing of the goods, supply chain, transportation. How does it get over the ocean to New York into the store, all the way to customer service, right? So if you know the entire life cycle of your business, you will be able to speak in a meaningful way that resonates with those non-lawyers that you work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have one more thing, Lydia. The convincing the leadership that you're important, I think, is part of the battle, but also bringing it back to them when you have, tangible results or value add that you can point to say, look, like, we did this for the business, is also the other half of that, right? So if it is, I just negotiated this contract and saved us this much money, or by, restructuring our insurance this way, we've defrayed our risk in this many different ways. All of that, it might not be part of that 95% work that they know you're doing, but you come back and you say, look, I did this. You do care about the end result, and this is how I helped you get there. And then that next time, the next time something comes up on their radar, they're more likely to think, oh yes, legal helped with this in this way. I want to bring them along again because I think it could be similar.
Absolutely. I think legal's also sometimes seen as this silent hero, if we even get the hero title. But, I think, business goes around and puffs their numbers every quarter. So we should do the same. I mean, and conversations like this, just us getting together and having conversations like this today, I think all go back to that initial question of how do you market your legal team to really show the value that it does have. So I think, Ramya, your point of, compiling those numbers and having tangible results to show to the leadership really makes a difference. And also on that dialogue aspect and that building relationship with the business team or even the counterparty that you're dealing with, there's, of course, various strategies that go into a negotiation. Every attorney approaches a negotiation slightly differently. And, I always like to see how the counterparty is reacting or how they like to lead their negotiations. It sort of helps me decide how I want to structure my own. And I think one of the things to keep in mind at the beginning of a negotiation, or at the beginning of your work with a new business team, let's say, that you're trying to build that relationship with, I'm very conscious of not jumping into a red line and just saying no to everything. I try to craft solutions, and I try to think in a creative way to reach a compromise. And once the business team sees that from me, they feel more comfortable. They trust in me more. They want to involve me more because they see I'm not just looking to shoot things down. I'm looking to think creatively and find solutions.
Thank you. That's awesome. So this is a really interesting question from the chat. A person has written, I find it interesting that everyone on the panel are women. Do you think women need to market their legal departments more than men do, or differently? That's very complicated. that might go beyond the scope of this particular webinar, but I would love to touch on that. So Sarah, do you have thoughts on that?
I was gonna say we would probably need some men to ask them if they feel that they have to market. I always felt that I had to, but I don't know if it was because I'm a woman. I think everywhere I've been, or for the most part, apart from a heavily regulated environment where legal is valued, because obviously it's a heavily regulated environment, so compliance plays a big part to the strategy. Everywhere else, it's always been, legal being the department of no. And I don't think it was necessarily linked to the fact that, the team members were women at all. and therefore needed to communicate more. I think it was more due to the very nature of what the legal department does, and the fact that nobody really understands what legal department do. So in my opinion, I don't think it's linked. But with that being said, maybe that's something that, general counsel, women general counsel might have a lot more challenges compared to GC's men, obviously. So in my opinion, I think it's more due to the nature of what the legal department does. And maybe finance or HR would have similar issues than us. So that would be, to me, the primary root cause. But again, I'm probably biased.
I think that it's a very interesting topic. And Sarah, for the most part, I agree with you. I think it would really be the case across, for both men and women, and I think for many other departments. Ramya, I think that you mentioned, I think we both actually recently spoke on another panel that spoke about, being a woman in business and being, what does that mean for how we do our business, how we engage with our colleagues. And I don't want this to be repetitive at all, but I think a lot of what we spoke about has to do with that like human connection and creating a relationship with someone and those strategies that you could employ while doing so. I think women have we have a slightly wider array of different strategies that we could take. And I think that women also have a way of connecting a little bit. It may be a little bit easier at the outset. Of course, that depends on the individual, but I think, there is an element of compassion and compromise that comes along with like leading a negotiation that's both strong and civil along the way. So I try to always strike that balance. I'm not sure how much of that is due to being a woman or just being a lawyer and trying to, find that balance, but I think it's an interesting question.
Great, thank you so much. Let's switch gears a little bit. We know that we have in our audience folks that are GCs at smaller companies. And do y'all have any tips for working in a smaller company?
I would echo what we were talking about earlier about having those presentations kind of in the bag, ready to go when you're starting off as a solo GC or as a small legal team in smaller companies, so that people can more effectively get to know you and what you do. But other than that, even aside from the presentations, put some time on people's calendar, just ad hoc, getting to know them. I certainly do this whenever we have new folks coming into business functions that I support, so that it's a very low pressure, agenda free setting where you just get to know each other, how you ended up at the company, what you like to do outside of work, just so that people have that rapport that's built up. And then they think of you less as like a scary lawyer who's going to come in and like ruin their day, and more as like a friend that they can come to with their challenges or their problems, and can have your counsel. And it's really low stakes. All you have to do, it's coffee. It's 15 minutes by the proverbial water cooler, and it actually, as time goes on, can reap dividends for you.
Absolutely. And I think this actually speaks to a lot of what we've been talking about. But another way that I think, smaller companies or smaller legal teams could look to market or enhance their legal is like personal branding of the individual attorneys on the team. Again, very similar to what we're doing right now. But I think encouraging the members of your legal team to participate in speaking engagements, to participate in conversations like this, to be a mentor to those in their community, to be a mentee to others in their community that they can learn from, and to always keep in touch with the people that have helped you along the way, whether it be throughout your career or on the other end, like dealing with the counterparty and maintaining a great relationship with them after you've closed the deal. I think things like that, if you can enhance the personal brand of your individual attorneys, the word will spread and people will feel good about your team. People will feel good about your people. And then I think once that gets back to the leadership team, then they'll really even see more of your value, and they'll maybe try to, listen to what you're saying a little bit more once you're able to increase your personal brand and share your value. Along with that, you're sharing the value of your company like we're doing right here today. So I think action like that sort of down the line comes back to leadership. They see that, and it definitely, I think, will force them to value you a little bit more, value their team.
I definitely agree with this point, Arianna. I think personal brand is a big one. When I started to create content on social media, I figured that I realized actually that my colleagues were following what I was doing. So they were following me on TikTok as well. So they saw all the TikTok I was doing about the in-house legal profession back in 2020. And they were just laughing. Like, they were just messaging me on Teams. Oh, you know what? Like, when you did this one, I felt attacked. I think it was me. When I push you to get those deals back. And I think this is really important. I think when you are publicly visible, I think people internally get to know you from a different angle. And it doesn't, I mean, you don't have to do TikTok videos. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that
I was going to say, I was getting very nervous with this tip.
I have to find Sarah on TikTok.
I mean, if you want to know all of my challenges I've been through as an in-house lawyer, yeah, you have to check my TikTok videos, because that has been my that has been something I've been very strong about for a year and a half. I wanted to showcase legal challenges in different ways.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, but my colleagues were just like, they just loved them because it was just entertaining. Of course, there was a lot of emphasis on salespeople, but because this is the people we serve the most. But it really kind of brings this different aspect of your personality. You know, you can be fun. You don't take yourself too seriously, and equally, you can do a really good job as an in-house lawyer. So I think whatever you're doing outside of work can really benefit you inside of work. So I definitely agree with you, Arianna, on the personal brand side. And something else I would say, maybe more internally, again, going back to those presentations and of those things, is that, I mean, I've been a sole counsel. I had zero budget. I had zero resources, and I was, as I often say, I was DIYing everything I was doing, right? And it's important to be experimental. I was doing infographics out of PowerPoint. I was project managing compliance project with Trello or with Airtable. Like, I was using free stuff to make everybody's lives easier. And it does go a really long way, because you're not waiting to have you're not waiting for the perfect time. You're not waiting for this budget that will change the way you deliver your services as a legal department. You are being creative, you're being proactive, and that really gets noticed internally, and it's very likely to get you more buy-in as well. So it doesn't matter if you have zero resources, be experimental, try things. Certain things will work, certain things won't necessarily be as good as you would expect, but it's really important to get into the habit of experimenting initiatives and really see what really works in terms of your internal positioning.
I think that's so cool, just to like like you said, sort of an outside of the box way of thinking or conveying the information. It gets people's attention. And also, to your point, Sarah, I think the more that you put yourself out there outside of your company and work on personal branding, the more people see your name and see your face out there. Somehow I think they find a little bit more respect for your role within your company, because they see that you're doing things elsewhere and other people respect what you do as well. So I think, that personal branding goes very far.
Yeah, I think with the personal branding, and there's a question about what's a good strategy to put that out there. I think it's important that it's authentic to you. So if you're not comfortable doing a TikTok video, then don't do a TikTok video, because it's not going to land. But I mean, it's like what ways are comfortable for you to show who you are. And I know this all sounds like a lot of pressure, but it's just baby steps. It's, network with other lawyers, be on a panel, be on another panel. I do stuff, I went to NYU, I do stuff with the NYU Venture Fund, which is, something through our law school. I'm involved in Tech GC, and it's just building the relationships within those networks. over time, and you'll just slowly build over time. So not a ton of pressure on that, but it's just good to keep that in mind. Something, going back to Sarah's point about you don't have to have a ton of resources, something that I did for over a year at Ouis in 2018, and this is free, I had office hours. So literally every week, and it felt a little bit like a slog, but every week on the company-wide Slack, hey everyone, I'm having office hours today between 2 and 3 in this conference room. Feel free to drop by with your legal or legal adjacent questions. And I met so many people at the company because it was so low pressure, because there's a lot of people who are going to just want to put time on your calendar, but they're like, oh, it's office hours. So it's kind of like a free for all, right? And everyone knows that. And this is the time that you've set aside for anyone to talk to them. So I mean, literally there'd be days like there'd be a line of people outside the conference room, which is weirdly hilarious. Some days there'd only be one person, but then you're just working in a conference room. And if no one comes, you just do your work in the conference room. So I built so many relationships. I also met a lot of really junior people at the company that I would never have met because they would normally not feel comfortable just putting time on my calendar. And I learned a ton about the business. And you kind of get like the tea, like what's going on, because you're building your relationship, right? And they're telling you like, oh, I have to do this thing. Can you help me, right? And it was just an amazing way to meet a ton of people, build the relationships. I learned a ton about how the company worked. And so I would really encourage you to do that. I mean, it could be 30 minutes a week and just set it up.
I love that.
Ease.
I might take that from you. I'd love that. It's quite
literally,
it's quite literally like an open door policy and makes people feel like they could just come in and I love that. I'm going to take that from you, Lydia. Thank you for sharing.
And you're super accessible. It's super easy, and then people will even say, oh, I can't make it today, but can I talk to you about this thing? And I'm like, yeah, you can talk to me about this thing. So super easy piece. I think we're coming up close on time. Oh, hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Hi. I was right. We are close on time.
Yeah, thank you guys for such a great chat. I know that the conversations in the comment section have been a flurry, and people are thrilled with the takeaways that they have today. So I appreciate it, Lydia, Ramya, Arianna, and Sarah. Thanks again for the time. And to everybody watching right now, feel free to head over to the left-hand sidebar and do some networking after. If you've got the time, you could be connected to some other like-minded folks. And then additionally, next week, we're going to be hosting another tactical chat on what first-time GCs should know about privacy. That's going to be with Peter Day from Shein and Jordan Major of Lively. So feel free to RSVP to that one. I think you can find that link in the comments and chat section of Hopin right here. So feel free to head on over to the networking. And thanks again for the time, ladies. We appreciate it.